My name's Delaney Pierce, and last month, I paid nearly $5,000 for my father's retirement dinner. Every plate, every chair, every drop of wine. And yet, when I showed up at the steakhouse that night, I wasn't even on the guest list. My name, the name on the catering invoice, was forgotten. I stood there at the hostess stand, holding the reservation receipt on my phone, while my sister smirked and my mother looked away. I thought it was a mistake. I thought someone would fix it. Instead, my little brother was the only one who told the truth, loudly in front of everyone. And that changed everything. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late-night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. The restaurant was all dark wood, white linen, and the kind of quiet only money can buy. I walked in wearing a navy jumpsuit I'd spent an hour picking out. Classy, not flashy. I had driven straight from the airport, wheeling a small suitcase behind me because I hadn't even stopped at the hotel. I wanted to be there on time. Early, actually. I thought it might surprise them. Instead, the surprise was mine. "Hi, I'm with the Pierce party. Retirement dinner for Richard?" I told the hostess. She checked the iPad, then frowned. "I don't see your name on the reservation." I smiled, already feeling heat rising in my chest. "That's okay. It's under my dad's name. I'm his daughter." She glanced at the screen again. "Guests are listed individually. I see Kendall Pierce, Mason Pierce, and several others. No Delaney." At that exact moment, my sister Kendall walked through the door in a pastel pantsuit like she was running for office. She saw me standing there and raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she said, "you came." "Of course I came," I replied. "Why wouldn't I?" She tilted her head, expression unreadable. "It's just, we weren't sure. You never RSVP'd." "Yes, I did. I emailed Dad's assistant. I even got a reply." Kendall smiled tightly. "Well, I handled the list personally. You must have slipped through." I turned to the hostess. "Can I just go in and find my family?" "I'm really sorry," she said, visibly uncomfortable. "But it's a private event. Only listed guests are allowed past the main dining room." Kendall walked past me, barely glancing back. "Maybe next time, check in before flying across the country." I was frozen, literally standing there with a carry-on suitcase and a tote bag, the same one that held the folder of receipts, including the invoice I paid weeks ago when Dad mentioned wanting something nice but modest. I called the restaurant, handled the payment, requested the exact wine he liked from Sonoma. I pulled up the email and showed the hostess. "I'm the one who paid for this. This is my credit card info. This is my name." She hesitated. "I'll need to get the manager." But then I heard it. Laughter. Familiar voices echoing from the private room in the back. My mom's laugh, Dad's warm baritone, Mason's sarcastic drawl. They were all in there, drinking and eating at the table I paid for. I stood there for maybe a full minute, watching servers pass me, watching Kendall float through the crowd like she'd orchestrated everything, which apparently she had, at least in name. That's when Mason appeared near the entrance, looking around for something. Or someone. His eyes met mine. He blinked, confused. Then frowned. He walked over. "What the hell? Why are you out here?" "Apparently I'm not on the list." His eyebrows shot up. "You're the one who paid for all of this." I didn't say anything. He looked over his shoulder, then back at me. "Wait here." And then he walked straight back into the room, right up to the center of the dinner, raised his glass, and said loud enough for the whole place to hear, "Before anyone toasts Kendall for putting this together, maybe we should all know. Delaney's the one who paid for this dinner, every single thing." And suddenly, everything stopped. I didn't stay to watch their reactions. After Mason's announcement, I quietly stepped back toward the bar, just far enough to be out of direct view, but close enough to hear the murmurs ripple across the room. I ordered a glass of water. My hands were shaking too much for wine, and tried to breathe through the humiliation. It wasn't the first time I'd felt invisible in this family, but it was the first time it was this public. I stared down at the napkin in front of me, watching the condensation gather under the glass. All those years, all the effort, and I was still the one left out. Growing up in Savannah, Georgia, in a house with matching blue shutters and a porch swing, you'd think my childhood was a dream. On paper, it was. Dad was a respected civil engineer. Mom ran a successful real estate office. Kendall was the golden child, 2 years older than me, with straight A's, debate trophies, and a full ride to Duke. Mason was the baby, funny and charming, able to talk his way out of any trouble and into anyone's heart. And me? I was somewhere in the middle, literally and figuratively. Not rebellious enough to be dramatic, not brilliant enough to be impressive. I liked to draw. I liked quiet. I liked color and chaos and things that didn't quite fit. When I got into art school in Oregon, Dad looked like I'd told him I planned to join the circus. "What kind of job are you going to get with that?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Mom was slightly more diplomatic. She called it unconventional. Kendall rolled her eyes and said, "Well, at least you won't be competing with me for internships." I moved west and for the first time felt like I could breathe. I poured everything into school and graduated early. Then I stayed in Portland and started my own creative agency, designing branding and packaging for small businesses. It took years of late nights, ramen dinners, and clients who paid 3 months late, but I made it work. Now, at 33, I had 8 employees, a lease on a sunlit studio downtown, and a long list of companies that respected my vision, even if my family didn't understand it. They never visited, not once. I sent Christmas gifts every year, handmade and carefully chosen. I paid for Mason's car repairs twice. I Venmo'd Mom grocery money when she mentioned things were a little tight during the housing slump. When she had a health scare last fall and needed some tests that insurance didn't fully cover, I paid the balance without saying anything. She sent me a thank you card, signed only Mom. Still, Kendall was the one they called when the washing machine broke or when Dad needed a new suit. She was the one sitting beside them at every church fundraiser and every Sunday lunch. Her presence was visible, immediate. Mine was invisible, financial, distant, transactional. And I guess to them, that didn't count. What stung most wasn't just being left off the guest list. It was the realization that I had become an afterthought. That even when I was doing something generous, something meant to connect, I was still categorized as other. The one who left. The one who changed zip codes and, in their minds, changed loyalty. I knew Kendall had always seen me as a threat, in some weird way. Not academically or socially, but emotionally. I never played by the same rules. I didn't need our parents' approval in the way she craved it. That made me dangerous to her. And apparently, it made me disposable. Still, I didn't expect my mom to go along with it. I didn't expect her to stay silent when I wasn't listed, or to smile so easily across that dinner table, acting like one of her kids wasn't standing 10 feet away, uninvited, with a receipt in hand. I glanced toward the room again. The dinner had resumed. Plates clinked. Laughter trickled back in, forced and uneven. Mason was gone from the table, probably looking for me. I checked my phone. One new message. "You okay? Want me to come out?" I replied, "I'm fine. Just needed to breathe." But that was a lie. I wasn't fine. I was unraveling, slowly and quietly, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I wasn't sure how long I sat at the bar, just staring at the melting ice in my water glass, but it was long enough for the bartender to start giving me sympathetic looks. I nodded politely when he offered to refresh my drink, but I didn't have the energy to answer. My phone buzzed again. Mason. They're acting like nothing happened. Kendall just gave a toast like she organized the whole thing. Dad's eating it up. You want me to call them out again? I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart was thudding too loudly, my throat too tight. A part of me wanted to storm back in there and lay everything bare, to let them know exactly how much it cost, not just in dollars, but in emotional labor. To spell out how many emails I'd exchanged with the event coordinator, how I'd researched Dad's favorite steakhouse for months, and how I'd taken time off a packed schedule just to fly across the country and be there. And they'd erased me from it entirely, but I didn't want to be seen as bitter. That's what always happened. Every time I tried to assert myself, Kendall twisted it. Delaney's so dramatic. She's always making a scene. She takes everything so personally. She'd been spinning that narrative since middle school, and people bought it because I was quiet, and she was loud and charming. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent, until Mason walked in. I heard his boots on the wood floor before I saw him. He slid onto the stool beside me and sighed. "They're a mess," he said flatly. "Dad's already tipsy. Mom keeps saying how lovely everything is, and Kendall won't shut up about how hard she worked on the floral centerpieces." I looked over at him. "You told them, though." He nodded. Loud enough to clear the air. And Dad didn't even blink, just kept cutting his prime rib like it wasn't news. Of course he didn't. Mason turned to face me. "Why didn't you say anything before? That you paid for it?" "Because it wasn't supposed to be about me," I muttered. "It was a gift. I didn't want credit. I just didn't expect to be erased." He nodded slowly, picking up a pretzel stick from the bar snack bowl and chewing thoughtfully. "You know, I don't think they even realize they do it." "Oh, they realize it," I said. "They just don't think it matters." We sat there in silence for a moment. Then he said, "Kendall told Mom you weren't coming." I turned my head sharply. "What?" "Last week. She told her you backed out. Said you had a big project and couldn't make it. That's why Mom didn't fight for you when you weren't on the list." "That's a lie." He gave me a tired smile. "I know." I closed my eyes, trying to process the betrayal layered in that one sentence. Kendall had set the whole thing up. Not just the dinner, but the narrative. She'd made sure I wasn't there, then took credit for something I made possible. "I don't get it," I whispered. "What does she gain from this?" "Control," Mason said simply. "She wants to be the one they depend on, the one who never left. And you're the ghost. The reminder that there's a world outside this family, outside this city, that you made something of yourself without needing them." "But I do need them," I said, my voice cracking. "Not to survive, but to belong, to be seen. I keep thinking if I do enough, give enough, I'll finally be part of it again." Mason placed a hand on my shoulder. "You are, Lainey, even if they don't say it, even if they're too stubborn or proud or blind to admit it." I looked at him, my little brother who never followed the rules, never tried to impress anyone, and who, of all people, had been the only one to say what needed to be said. "Why'd you speak up?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Because it wasn't right, and because I'm sick of watching you do all the heavy lifting and still be treated like you're not in the room." My throat tightened again, but this time for a different reason. "Come back in," he said. "You don't have to say anything. Just be there. Let them feel it." I hesitated. The idea of walking back into that room, past the people who had smiled and toasted without even asking where I was, it made my stomach turn. But maybe he was right. Maybe silence this time wasn't the answer. Maybe presence was the loudest message I could send. I followed Mason back toward the private dining room with my heart pounding hard enough to echo in my ears. The hum of conversation grew louder as we neared the entryway again. I could see the backs of heads, glasses being raised, forks scraping plates. Laughter. The kind of polished family celebration you only see in holiday commercials. I felt like I was walking straight into a play where I'd been cut from the cast. Only now, everyone would know I'd written the script. "Just come in with me," Mason said under his breath. "No announcements, no drama. Let them see you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The moment we stepped through the door, the energy in the room shifted. Not dramatically, but just enough that I felt it in my skin. A couple heads turned. Aunt Lorraine paused mid-bite. One of Dad's colleagues blinked like he was seeing a ghost. No one said anything, but the air was different. Kendall noticed immediately. She was standing near the fireplace, wine glass in hand, still glowing in that practiced, polished way of hers. Her smile faltered for half a second when she saw me walk in. Then she glanced at Mason beside me, and her eyes narrowed. "Delaney," she said, voice high and sweet. "You made it after all." Mason muttered something that sounded like, "Wow," but I kept my face neutral. "I've been here," I replied, "just not in the room." "Oh?" She tilted her head, innocent and sharp at once. "You should have said something. We would have made space." I opened my mouth to respond, but then I saw Mom. She was at the far end of the table, sitting next to Dad, looking tired, but still elegant in her blue silk blouse. When she saw me, her expression changed, not to surprise, but to something closer to guilt. Her hand went to her chest, then dropped into her lap. She stood, slowly. "Lainey," she said softly, using the nickname she hadn't called me in years. "I didn't know you were here, you?" "I know," I replied. "I'm sorry I didn't come in sooner." "Why weren't you on the list?" she asked, stepping toward me now. "Kendall said—" She stopped herself, then turned to my sister. "You said she canceled." Kendall blinked. "That's what I was told. Maybe there was a miscommunication." "There wasn't," I cut in. My voice was calm, even. "I never canceled. I rearranged meetings. I booked a flight. I paid for this dinner." That last line rippled through the room like a dropped glass. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad's brow furrowed. Kendall didn't move, but her face flushed a deeper red. "I wanted it to be a gift," I continued. "I wanted to do something for Dad, for you, because you matter to me, even if it's not always obvious from a distance." Kendall's voice cut in, sharp and brittle. "You're making this about yourself again. You always—" "No!" Mason snapped, louder than anyone expected. "She's not. She's telling the truth. Something you've been trying to bury since the moment she offered to help." People at the table shifted uncomfortably. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not turn this into—" "It already is something," I said, quieter now. "It's always been something. I just didn't want to believe it." Mom stepped closer, her voice wavering. "Lainey, I'm so sorry. I should have asked. I should have checked." "It's okay," I said, meaning it. "I just needed to say it out loud. I'm tired of being the one who loves quietly and gets forgotten loudly." Dad rose to his feet. "We didn't forget you." "You did," I said gently. "Not on purpose. But still." There was silence. Then, unexpectedly, Dad stepped around the table and walked over to me. He looked older than I remembered, less sure of himself. He reached out slowly, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," he said, "for this dinner, for coming, for speaking up. It wasn't much, but it was something." I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Kendall turned away. She didn't say another word. I knew this wasn't over between us, not even close. But for once, she didn't get to own the narrative. I had stepped into the room. I had told the truth, and people had heard it. That was enough, for now. The rest of the evening played out in a quiet, delicate balance. People avoided eye contact for a while, unsure whether to acknowledge what had just happened or pretend it didn't. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. The laughter returned, thinner now, and only after everyone had taken a breath. I found a seat near Mason, not at the center of the table, but not in the shadows either. Mom brought me a plate herself, brushing a strand of hair from my face the way she used to when I was little. She didn't say much, but she kept her hand on my shoulder a few seconds longer than necessary. That meant more than any apology. Dad gave a toast a little while later, this time with my name included. He stumbled over the words, clearly unpracticed at offering public praise for me, but he tried. "To both my daughters," he said, raising his glass. "One who's always kept us steady, and one who reminded us what strength really looks like." Kendall didn't lift her glass. She didn't have to. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. After dessert, as guests began trickling out, I stayed back to help clear the table with Mason and a few cousins. Kendall disappeared without saying goodbye. No surprise there. But just before I left, Mom pressed a folded napkin into my hand. Inside was the thank you card I had sent her with the invoice for the dinner tucked neatly inside. On the card, she had written, in new ink, "I see you. I'm sorry it took me so long." Back at my hotel, I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. I felt something new. Not quite peace, but the beginning of it. A fracture sealed, if not yet healed. Over the next few weeks, small things started changing. Mom texted me a picture of her garden. Then another of the dog. Then a photo of a sketch I made in middle school that she'd found while cleaning out a drawer. Dad emailed me an article about branding strategies and added, "Thought this might be up your alley." He never used to ask about my work. Kendall didn't reach out, not for a while, but when she did, it was an email. Short, measured. I was wrong about how I handled things. I can't promise I'll always get it right, but I'm trying to see things more clearly now. K. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. I still do. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a process. And trust, once broken, isn't something you rebuild overnight. But her message was a start. And maybe, someday, we'd meet in the middle. As sisters. As women trying to find their way out of roles that never quite fit. What surprised me most wasn't how the family changed, but how I did. Speaking up didn't make me harder. It made me softer, oddly, more whole. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was clawing for space at the table. I knew I had earned it, and more than that, I knew I could leave it if I needed to. Mason and I talk more now. He even came to Portland for a long weekend. We hiked, made pasta from scratch, and stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. He told me he's thinking about moving west. "Fresh start," he said. "You proved it's possible." That night, as we sat on my tiny balcony with cheap wine and overpriced takeout, he looked over at me and said, "You know, you didn't just pay for that dinner. You paid for the truth to come out." I didn't answer right away, but I smiled. Because maybe that's what all of this was about. Not revenge or validation or even credit, but truth. Raw, uncomfortable, necessary truth. The kind that doesn't explode but unfolds, that clears space for something real. What about you? Have you ever had to stand your ground with the people who should have known you best? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. If you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.